Hello everyone, I'm Mr.Graveveil, a horror storyteller. Before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos like this. Now, let's begin. I've lived in the same house for 7 years. Quiet neighborhood, older houses, no big surprises. People keep to themselves here. We wave, but we don't talk. It suits me fine. My dog, Baxter, knows the street better than I do. Every evening around 8, we walk the same loop, past the mailboxes around the bend, and back along the sidewalk that runs past the house on the corner. That house had been empty for months until last week. Someone moved in overnight. No moving truck. No lights. Just the sudden presence of life where there hadn't been any. The next day, I noticed the blinds in the front window were shut tight, curtains drawn, no car in the driveway. The lawn was freshly cut though, and something about that bothered me more than it should have. That evening, as we walked past the house, Baxter stopped. He didn't sniff or wander. He froze, muscles tight, head low, eyes locked on the side gate of the house. Then he growled, low and steady, a sound I'd never heard from him before. It wasn't playful, it was warning. I tugged the leash gently. He didn't move. I gave another pull, and finally, he turned, ears flat, tail low. For the rest of the walk, he kept looking back, his body tense. That night, around 2 a.m., he barked again, short, sharp bursts. I looked through the window but saw nothing. The street was empty. I told myself it was nothing. New neighbor, new sounds, old dog. But deep down, I felt it too. Something about that house didn't belong. The next few nights, Baxter refused to go near the neighbor's house. He'd dig in his heels at the sidewalk, tail between his legs, and pull the leash in the opposite direction. It wasn't like him. He used to love our walks. Now, it was like dragging a dog through a nightmare only he could see. I tried crossing the street to avoid the house. Didn't help. Even from across the road, Baxter would stop, eyes fixed on that same side gate, ears perked as if waiting for something to move. Then one night, just before bedtime, he started scratching the front door. Not to go out, to come back in. He'd been outside for maybe 2 minutes, and I hadn't heard anything unusual. But when I opened the door, he ran past me so fast he knocked over a chair. He spent the rest of the night under my bed. Wouldn't come out. Wouldn't eat. Just stared at the door like he expected it to open. No one ever came in or out of that house. No trash bins moved. No porch lights. Yet the lawn stayed perfect. One afternoon, I noticed the back gate was open just enough to see part of the yard. There were no toys, no grill, no sign anyone lived there. Just one thing, a single folding chair, facing the fence that separated our yards. 2 nights later, it was just past midnight. Baxter was in the living room, curled on his bed. I was getting ready to turn in when I heard a low growl. He wasn't facing the door this time. He was staring at the window. The blinds were shut, but something in the way his body tensed, like prey sensing a predator, made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that Baxter was trying to tell me something. He hadn't barked in days, just watched the neighbor's fence like something might crawl over it. I decided to attach a small recorder to his collar, nothing fancy, just enough to catch sound if anything was really happening out there. That night, I let him out at 11:47 p.m. and left the back door slightly open. He hesitated, but walked into the yard. I didn't go with him. I just stood inside, lights off, watching through the window. He didn't bark, didn't move much either. He just stood near the fence for almost 10 minutes. Then, without warning, he turned and came back in. I played the recording right away. Most of it was what I expected. Wind, distant cars, a rustle or two from the bushes. But then something stood out. At the 7-minute mark, I heard what sounded like a voice. Not clear, not enough to catch actual words, but a male voice. Low, close to the fence. It wasn't mine. It came once, then again, like someone softly repeating something. maybe trying to coax him. The voice wasn't aggressive. It was familiar calm, like a neighbor saying, "Come here, buddy." But I never said that, and I hadn't spoken to a single neighbor since the new one moved in. I checked the time, 11:54 p.m. At that exact minute, I remembered Baxter turning his head suddenly during the watch. Could someone have been standing just on the other side of the fence? It wasn't illegal, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And that scared me more than anything I could have imagined. The next night, Baxter didn't come back. I let him out around the same time, like always. He stood by the door for a while before stepping into the yard. I waited by the window, watching. He did his usual circle of the grass, sniffed near the fence, then disappeared behind the shed for a few seconds. Nothing unusual. Then he was gone. At first, I thought maybe he'd found a way under the fence. I checked the corners, nothing disturbed. No holes, no loose boards. I called his name for half an hour. Nothing. No bark, no scratching at the door. I walked the block twice. Shined a flashlight under every parked car. Asked two neighbors I barely knew. No one had seen him. Around 1 a.m., I remembered the recorder. I hadn't taken it off his collar. I opened the file, heart racing. The first part was normal. Wind, Baxter's movements, distant traffic. Then, around the 9-minute mark, something shifted. A metallic creak, like a gate opening. Then footsteps, not four-legged. Slow, heavy, close. Then a voice, muffled but unmistakably male, "Easy boy." The shuffle of something being dragged. The file cut off 2 minutes later. I didn't sleep that night. I left the porch light on. I kept waking to check the door. By morning, he still wasn't back. I filed a report with animal control, then posted in the neighborhood group. A few people shared it, but no one had seen anything. What unsettled me more than his disappearance was the absence of any reaction from next door. The yard looked the same. Gate shut, curtains drawn. Not a sound. I considered knocking, but something stopped me. Not fear, exactly. More like the sense that I was already too late. 3 days later, I found Baxter sitting on the porch. He wasn't scratched, wasn't dirty, just still. His fur was damp like he'd been out in the rain, though it hadn't rained. His eyes didn't follow me when I opened the door. He didn't wag his tail, just stared at the street ahead. I called his name, knelt, reached out. He flinched slightly but didn't run. When I brought him inside, he walked straight to the corner of the living room and lay down with his back to the window. He stayed there for hours. That night, he refused to eat, wouldn't look at me. No whining, no tail thumps, only long, quiet stares whenever the wind rustled the bushes. I checked him over, no visible injuries, no limping. But something in him was different, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I tried the collar recording again the next night. This time, I left it on him while he was inside, just to be sure I wasn't missing anything. Around 2 a.m., the file caught faint footsteps near the side of the house. They came and went. No barking, no growling. Just Baxter shifting in place. I stood at the window the next night, lights off, hoping to see whoever it was. Nothing. But I did notice something I hadn't before. The light in the neighbor's back room flicked on briefly around 2:15 a.m. It didn't stay. Just blinked once, then gone. The same time Baxter had shifted. I started checking my security footage more carefully. Not live, just the recordings. That's when I found a clip from the previous week. It showed me standing at the back door, looking out. But there was a second shape, faint, to the far right of the frame. Someone leaning against the fence. No movement, no obvious detail. Just a person-shaped shadow that hadn't been there a second earlier. That was the night Baxter first started refusing to walk past that house. Last night, my camera caught something again. Not clear, just motion by the side gate, around 3:12 a.m. I paused the footage. It wasn't the neighbor, it was me. Same build, same clothes. Just standing there, perfectly still. And inside the house, Baxter watched the door, not blinking once. I had just started a week-long stay in an old Victorian-style house I found on a short-term rental app. It was cheap, quiet, and just outside the city, ideal for someone who needed time alone. The owner said it was great for focusing, but forgot to mention the storm-prone area. That first night, the wind never stopped. Rain hit the windows in uneven bursts, and the wooden frame of the house creaked constantly, like it was breathing. Around midnight, I walked down the narrow hallway to get a bottle of water from the kitchen. The house was colder than I expected. As I passed the long window that overlooked the backyard, something froze me mid-step. A figure stood outside, not moving. Just there. Backlit by a dim porch light, it looked like someone staring directly at the house. I blinked. It was gone. I stood there a few seconds longer, convincing myself it was a trick of the shadows, maybe a tree branch or reflection from the glass. I didn't want to overreact on my first night. Still, I couldn't sleep well. Every time the wind howled or the house groaned, I imagined that shape returning, just standing there, waiting. The next morning felt almost normal. The sunlight through the kitchen window made me question the memory from the night before. Maybe I had imagined it. That's what I told myself until I reviewed the security cameras. The house came with a basic indoor and outdoor system, viewable from an app. I clicked through the timeline casually, not expecting anything. But at 12:04 a.m., the backyard camera picked up something strange. A faint distortion. Not a person, but something that shimmered oddly in the shape of a figure, right where the window was. It only lasted a second. Then it was gone. That night, I left a light on in the hallway and kept the blinds closed. I tried watching something to distract myself. But at midnight, I found myself walking past the same window again. I don't even remember deciding to go. It was like something pulled me there. This time, I didn't see anything. I stood there for maybe 2 minutes, heart racing, just wind and rain. I turned around. Then I heard it. A faint tap, once, then again. I spun back toward the window, but it was empty. I leaned closer, squinting through the reflection of the hallway light. That's when I saw it. Not a person, not exactly, but a shape. Just beyond the reach of the light, motionless. A tall outline, almost blending into the night. Watching. I backed away slowly, not blinking, until I reached the bedroom door. I locked it and didn't sleep. Not really. I told myself it had to be my imagination again. The cameras would show nothing. That's what they always did. But by the third night, it stood closer. On the third morning, I hesitated before checking the cameras. I almost didn't want confirmation that I wasn't imagining it, but I had to know. 12:03 a.m., the camera froze for 5 seconds. No distortion. No glitches, just stillness. And then, one frame showed something different, a handprint, pressed against the inside of the window. I paused the footage, rewound, replayed it frame by frame. It didn't make sense. The window hadn't been opened, and I hadn't seen anything that night. But the handprint was there in the morning. I went to check. Faint, almost gone, but the oily smudge was real. The power cut out that evening just before sunset. No wind this time. No lightning. The lights just died, and the silence that followed was thicker than any storm. My phone still worked, so I lit the way with it, heart pounding. The kitchen clock had stopped at 6:17 p.m. Around 11, I sat in the living room with a flashlight in my lap, facing the hallway window. I promised myself I'd stay calm, just observe. At 12 o'clock exactly, I heard it again. 3 knocks. Slow, measured, coming from the window. But this time, I didn't rush forward. I waited, and then I saw it. The same figure, standing much closer now, inches from the glass. Its features still indistinct, like fog behind skin. But I could feel it watching me. The flashlight flickered, and the air felt colder. I whispered out loud, almost as if to confirm I still existed. "Who are you?" Then, a sound from behind, not the window. The hallway. I turned quickly, scanning the darkness. Nothing there. But when I looked back at the window, it was empty again. That was the first time I locked the bedroom door and pushed furniture in front of it. The fourth night came with an unfamiliar calm. No wind, no creaks. The air was too still, like the house was holding its breath. I didn't bother checking the cameras anymore. They either froze or caught nothing. Instead, I focused on little details. Doors that didn't creak before now did. The smell in the hallway, slightly metallic. The shadows in the corners seemed to move if I stared too long. Just before midnight, I walked slowly down the hallway. I told myself I wouldn't look at the window. But my eyes drifted anyway, no figure. But there was something else, 5 smudges. Like fingertips pressed against the glass from the inside. Newer, clearer, and below them, a line drawn down, almost like a nail had scratched along the window. Then my phone buzzed. I froze. Every light was off. I had been in the hallway the whole time. No one else was in the house. I checked the footage. The live feed loaded. For a moment, the kitchen looked empty. But then, in a flicker, a shadow shifted across the far wall. Too fast, too fluid. It looked like someone crawling, but without sound. Then the screen went black. I stood in the hallway, phone in hand, barely breathing. A soft creak behind me. I turned slowly. The bedroom door, the one I had barricaded the night before, was slightly open. I hadn't opened it. I stepped back, the floor cold under my feet. I whispered, "This isn't real," but it felt real. Every sound, every cold breath, every silence that stretched too long. I looked around for something, anything to make it stop. Then my phone buzzed again, new footage from the living room camera. The screen loaded, and there I was, standing in the hallway. But behind me, a figure, barely visible, head tilted, no eyes, no features, just a vague human shape, blurred by the grain of the footage, but it was inside. I dropped the phone. I didn't sleep at all. I didn't even sit down. I spent the hours pacing between the hallway and the living room, jumping at every sound the house made. At some point, I noticed something strange. The figure no longer appeared at the window. It had always been there. That same spot, always just outside the glass. But now, nothing. I stood in front of the window for several minutes. No shape, no shadow. Just empty blackness outside. But the absence felt worse than the visits. Around 3 a.m., I heard the floor creak upstairs. Just one step. Then silence. I wasn't even sure anyone had been up there. The owner had said the second floor was under renovation and kept it locked. But that night, the sound came again, a low shuffle, then a slow drag. Like something was moving across the wood floor. I held my breath. Then, the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open inside the house. I backed away from the window, flashlight trembling in my hand. I locked myself in the bedroom and pushed the dresser against the door again, heart racing. Footsteps approached from the hallway, slow, confident, not hiding. They stopped right outside the door. I held my breath. The flashlight flickered once. Then the handle moved. Not violently, just a soft turn, like someone testing it. The door didn't open. But when I woke up, if I even slept, the dresser had been pushed an inch away from the door. Not enough to mean anything, but enough to prove someone or something had tried. In the morning, sunlight poured into the hallway like nothing had happened. I stood in silence, unsure what was real. But just before leaving, I noticed it. A single wet footprint in the center of the floor, half dried. and the bedroom window, which I never opened, was now cracked open. I live alone in a small ground floor apartment in a quiet building on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just one bedroom, an open kitchen, and decent Wi-Fi, which, until recently, was the only thing that never gave me trouble. Last week, while working late, I opened the router app on my phone to check the signal strength. That's when I noticed something strange. There was a device connected to my network, one I didn't recognize. The name caught my eye first. It was nearly identical to my own phone. Same model, same format. The only difference was a single number at the end, like a copy, Galaxy_S22_Mike_2. I checked all my devices, laptop, TV, tablet, everything accounted for. No reason for a duplicate. I blocked the unknown device, reset the password just to be safe, and forgot about it. The next night, it was back. Same name. Same strange timing, always after 2 a.m. Again, I removed it. And again, it came back. I started to wonder if maybe it was a neighbor, someone who guessed the password or got it by mistake. But the network was private, and the name, that exact copy, didn't sit right with me. I updated the router firmware, changed the network name entirely, and made the password a mess of symbols and numbers. That should have been enough. But when I checked again 2 nights later, the name was back. Not just connected, already active. Galaxy_S22_Mike_2. It didn't feel like an accident anymore. I became obsessed. Every night after midnight, I checked the router app like clockwork. The duplicate device would appear between 2:30 and 3 a.m., always for about 20 to 30 minutes, then disappear without warning. It never used much data. No streaming, no downloads, just barely enough to register. But the consistency of it, that was what unnerved me. I enabled logging on the router. Every connection, disconnection, data burst. I wanted it all tracked. Then I installed a basic network monitor app that showed estimated location of connected devices based on signal strength. One night, as the duplicate appeared again, I opened the tool and walked slowly through the apartment with my phone in hand. The signal got stronger near the living room wall that bordered the hallway, then weaker, then strong again near the front window, the one facing the small courtyard between buildings. At 2:43 a.m., it peaked. I stood in the dark, phone glowing, staring out through the blinds. My floor had 5 units. Mine was on the end. The strongest reading came from the unit next to mine, apartment 1B. That apartment had been vacant for months. The last tenant moved out in the spring. I remember because I helped him carry a sofa down the stairs. I checked the building's online directory. It still listed 1B as unoccupied. Yet here I was, watching a signal flare up from that exact wall. I considered telling the landlord, but what would I say? Hi, someone might be faking my phone and using my Wi-Fi from the empty unit next door. It sounded insane. Still, I couldn't ignore the timing, or the name, or how quiet the hallway felt lately, like the air outside my door had thickened. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about Wi-Fi anymore. The pattern solidified. Every night, the device connected between 2:34 and 3:12 a.m. Never earlier. Never later. It felt deliberate, like someone had set a reminder to connect at the exact same time. I started leaving my phone's screen recorder on, capturing the router activity live. Nothing ever changed. Same name, same timing, same quiet disappearance. Until the night I stayed up by the window. I turned off all the lights, sat behind the curtain, and watched the apartment next door. No movement, not even shadows. But at 2:36 a.m., a light turned on, faint, just a glow behind the curtain of 1B. It stayed on for about 12 seconds, then blinked off. I recorded the moment, played it back, It wasn't a flicker. It was intentional. I got up, walked to the door, opened it just a crack. The hallway was silent. The door to 1B still sealed shut, paint chipping along the frame. I stepped back and locked everything. The next night, I kept the camera pointed at my own front door, just to see if anyone passed. Nothing at first. But then, at exactly 3 a.m., my doorbell rang. Just once. I sat up so fast I knocked over the lamp. By the time I looked through the peephole, no one was there. No footsteps. No noise down the hall. Nothing on the camera. The notification showed the press, 1 ring, exactly 3 hours 0 minutes and 1 second a.m., and then nothing. I didn't sleep that night, and the device, still connected. Still listed as active, but that night, the name changed. It was no longer Galaxy_S22_Mike_2. It now said, just _Mike. I upgraded everything. New router, stronger firewall, longer password. I even set up a local-only rule so only devices physically inside the apartment could connect. And yet, 2 nights later, just _Mike was back. Worse, my network name had been changed. It now read, Nice night _Mike, a phrase I'd typed hours earlier in a text to my sister. No one else had seen it. I hadn't said it out loud. It wasn't saved anywhere public. Whoever was doing this wasn't just connecting. They were inside something. I checked my devices. Nothing looked out of place. I ran scans, factory reset my phone. But the thought stuck with me. What if it's not about the Wi-Fi? What if the network was just how they got in? That's when I installed a small camera above my door, pointed down the hallway. Just motion triggered, enough to catch any late night movement. For 3 nights, nothing. Then on the 4th, I woke up to an alert. Motion detected, 2:58 a.m. I opened the clip. A figure was walking past my door. Not fast, not slow, head lowered, face out of frame, no sound. But right when they reached the center of the frame, the video glitched. It froze for half a second, skipped ahead. The person was gone. I replayed it dozens of times. Same gap, like someone had intentionally cut just those 2 seconds. But this was a live recording, unedited. I checked the Wi-Fi log. At 2:59 a.m., a new device had appeared for 20 seconds. Name. And at 3:01, my smart speaker, which I never used, had powered on for exactly 3 seconds, then gone dark again. I didn't hear it, but the log said it had activated. I unplugged everything that night. Speaker, TV, laptop, even my phone. I sat in the kitchen with a flashlight and waited. No noises, no knocks. But on the kitchen table was the router admin screen, still open from earlier. The mouse cursor moved, not wildly, not glitching, just a soft drift across the screen, and hovered over factory reset, and then it stopped. The next morning, I went into full lockdown mode. Changed every password, disconnected the router, shut down all smart devices, even bought a basic burner phone. I told myself this was it. No more signals, no more games. Whatever had been slipping through the cracks would stop now. I stayed awake that night, didn't even pretend to sleep. I moved the couch to block the front door, unplugged everything, and waited in the kitchen with a flashlight. At 2:50, the unplugged router blinked. I stood over it, staring. There were no cords, no power, but the little green light pulsed once, then faded. I checked the wall, the surge protector, nothing was connected. Still, the signal light had come alive. At 3:07, the door hinges let out a low creak. Not loud enough to be obvious, but not imagined either. I hadn't heard a key. Nothing moved on the handle. I walked to the door and placed my hand on the wood. The hallway on the other side felt heavy, as if something was waiting on the other side of silence. When I turned back toward the kitchen, my phone screen was lit. I hadn't touched it. The message app was open, showing a typed draft already in the text box. "Did you hear me, Mike?" I shut the phone off, took the battery out, and left it face down on the counter. I didn't want to look at it again, but I had to check. I powered it back on long enough to open the microphone access history. It had been activated at 2:51 a.m. The log said 16 seconds. There was a single system-generated recording saved. I put in my headphones and listened, shuffling, room tone, my breathing. Then, one line, spoken low and close to the mic. Same voice I've heard all my life. I'm inside now. I haven't said a word since. I wiped the system, changed everything again, disconnected from the internet entirely. For days, there was silence. But last night, while checking nearby Wi-Fi signals, a new network appeared. It was named Mic_Original. My router was unplugged. My phone was off, and someone else was already broadcasting from inside the building. The apartment above mine had been empty for months. No footsteps, no water running, no muffled voices through the floorboards. I'd gotten used to the silence, maybe too used to it. Then, about 2 weeks ago, I heard the sound of furniture being moved late at night. Nothing aggressive, just soft dragging noises and the occasional dull thump. The next morning, a handwritten note was taped to the main entrance of the building. "Hi, I just moved into 4B. Sorry for the noise. Lauren." Lauren. I passed her in the hallway for the first time 2 days later. She was polite, quiet, early 30s maybe. Wore neutral clothes, kept her hair tied back, barely made eye contact. Something about her presence seemed muted, like she was deliberately trying to avoid being noticed. Still, it didn't bother me. I'd rather have a silent neighbor than a loud one. But then I noticed she left for work at the same time I did, 7:05 a.m. on the dot. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence. We crossed paths a few times in the hallway, each nod and smile identical to the last. Same shoes, same expression. One day, as we waited for the elevator, I noticed she was wearing a jacket just like mine. Same color, same brand. Slightly faded, same spot on the sleeve where the stitching was loose. That caught my attention. She didn't look at me when I turned, just stared ahead, hands folded. That evening, I got home and checked my coat rack. My jacket was still there. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop noticing the details. At first, it was just clothes, the jacket. Then a pair of sneakers I'd bought months ago, same color, same scuff marks. One morning, I saw her coming down the stairs wearing a navy blue hoodie with a small bleach stain on the left shoulder. I had the same hoodie, same stain. I checked that night. Mine was still in my drawer. She started standing the same way I did, leaning on the same hip when waiting for the elevator, holding her phone in her left hand, just like me, even scrolling with the same rhythm. I didn't say anything. What was I supposed to say? Hey, stop copying me. It felt absurd. But the more I saw it, the harder it was to ignore. I changed my route to work. Instead of taking the bus from Maple Street, I walked 2 extra blocks to a different stop. The next day, she was there. Same time, same earbuds. She never looked at me, never spoke. Just stood a few feet away, same posture, same blank expression. That night, I went to the gym, something I hadn't done in weeks. I didn't post about it. Didn't tell anyone. Just showed up. She was there. Treadmill. 3 machines down. Same shoes. Same bottle. Even her towel looked like mine. Same faded orange stripe on the edge. I left early, heart racing. Back home, I checked my closet again. My drawers, the laundry. Nothing missing. Everything in its place. She wasn't stealing anything. She was copying, deliberately, patiently, and the worst part? She was getting better at it. I started testing her. One morning, I left for work 10 minutes earlier than usual. Took a completely different route, skipped the bus altogether, and walked through side streets I hadn't used in years. At the last intersection before my building, I saw her waiting across the street. She didn't acknowledge me, just stood there, same coat, same pace. Crossed when I crossed. At the coffee shop I sometimes stopped at, I asked the barista a question I never ask, if they had almond milk. As I sat down with my drink, I saw her in line. She ordered almond milk. Sat 2 tables away. Wore a silver ring on her right index finger. I wear the same one. Bought it last year on a trip. It's not common. I went home that evening and put the ring away in a drawer. The next morning, she wasn't wearing hers either. It was subtle but precise. Not mimicking, mirroring. And yet, I could never catch her watching me. I started scanning the hallways, timing her steps. I even tried leaving the building without making any noise, but she'd still manage to appear nearby within minutes. One afternoon, I decided to leave the office early. Without warning, I didn't go home. I wandered through random blocks, took buses I'd never taken, changed direction halfway through a walk just to see if I could shake her. 2 hours in, I turned a corner near a bookstore I hadn't visited in years. She was there, sitting on a bench. Head down, scrolling her phone. Same haircut, same posture. I stood across the street and didn't move. And then slowly, she looked up. Right at me. I stopped leaving home without locking everything. Started checking under the bed, inside closets. I told myself it was paranoia, but it didn't feel like it. I hadn't shared any of this with friends. I didn't post anything online. But somehow, she kept knowing more. One night, I left a notebook open on the kitchen counter. It wasn't anything important, just a few lines I had written down after a strange dream. I went to bed around midnight. The next morning, the notebook had been moved. Same place, but the page was turned. The pen was missing. When I opened the hallway door that morning, she was standing just a few steps away, staring out the window. As I passed her, she said something under her breath. I almost missed it, but I heard it. Word for word, it was what I had written in the notebook. That sentence had never left the apartment. My hands went cold. I didn't say anything. Just walked past, heart pounding. She didn't follow, didn't speak again. That night, I checked all the locks. No signs of forced entry. I reviewed my security cam footage. Nothing. Not a single frame showing anyone near my door. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I placed a hair across the edge of the front door and taped a thread inside the closet. Subtle traps, the kind you'd only trigger if you opened something carefully. The next morning, the hair was gone. The thread was on the floor, no signs of damage. Nothing stolen, nothing moved, just accessed. That evening, I waited in the corridor, hidden behind the door to the stairs. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not loud, deliberate. She walked down the hallway and stopped in front of my door. She didn't knock, didn't touch the handle. She just stood there, then turned to face the door, like someone preparing for a mirror. I didn't breathe. Her posture matched mine exactly. I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to confront her. That morning, I waited until she left the apartment. I followed her, not to spy, but to see what she did when I wasn't visible. She walked normally, kept to her usual route. But then she stopped at the mirror outside the pharmacy. She adjusted her hair, and that's when I saw it. Behind her left ear, a faint scar, same location as mine. I'd had a small surgery there as a kid, nothing major, but the scar never faded. I've never shown it to anyone, never talked about it. It's always hidden beneath my hair. I froze. She turned her head slightly, and for a moment, it looked like she was trying to check my reflection in the glass. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at my door. Around 2:30 a.m., I got up, walked slowly upstairs, and stood in front of 4B, her apartment. I knocked once. The light under the door flickered. Then a voice answered. It was mine. Not similar, not close, mine, exact tone, same pacing. Like hearing a playback of a recording I hadn't made. I didn't respond. Just turned and walked back downstairs. In the elevator mirror, I checked my own face. Same lines, same eyes. But the reflection felt wrong, slightly delayed, like it was trying to match me in real time. When I stepped into my apartment, the hallway light above me turned off. Then, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It said, "You're learning fast." This morning, I passed her in the hallway. But this time, she didn't avoid eye contact. She stared straight at me, then tilted her head exactly how I tilt mine. We stepped into the elevator together. In the mirror, only one reflection showed, and I wasn't sure if it was mine. Mr. Delaney lived directly above me. I barely knew him. He was old, quiet, never spoke unless spoken to. We'd pass in the hallway sometimes, a nod from him, a polite smile from me, nothing more. Then one morning, an ambulance pulled up. 2 paramedics carried a stretcher covered in a black sheet. No sirens, no rush. Just quiet wheels squeaking down the corridor. The building sent out an email later that day. Mr. Delaney had passed away in his sleep. No family, no next of kin. A week passed. Then another. I didn't think about him again until I ran into the building manager, Carla, by the mailboxes. She looked tired, overwhelmed. "Hey, listen," she said. "We're clearing out 5B this weekend. You wouldn't mind helping for a bit, would you?" I hesitated, but agreed. It felt like the decent thing to do. Saturday morning, I met Carla outside the apartment. She unlocked the door and handed me gloves and a box of trash bags. "Anything personal, put aside. We'll inventory it later." The place was clean, sparse, not much furniture. A small bed, 2 chairs, a dusty TV. The windows were all covered in thick curtains. There was barely any sunlight. I was assigned to the bookshelf in the living room. It was crammed, not with novels or DVDs, but with black, identical notebooks. Dozens of them, tightly packed, no labels, no dust. I pulled one out at random, opened to a middle page. The handwriting was tight, neat, meticulous. I read, "Today he opened the fridge twice. First time, he didn't take anything. Second time, he pulled out a bottle of orange juice. He hesitated, then put it back." I froze. He was writing about me. I didn't say anything to Carla, just quietly slipped the notebook into the box she'd labeled personal items. My hands were shaking a little. I moved on to the next shelf, pretending I hadn't seen anything strange. But all the notebooks were the same. Black cover, no markings. I pulled another one out, opened it. 7:04 a.m., he woke up. Scratched his left eye. Sat on the edge of the bed for 42 seconds before standing. Another page. He received a phone call today at 5:18 p.m. He didn't answer. He looked at the screen, turned it face down, and continued watching TV. It wasn't just general notes. These were exact records of my daily life. Not just what I did, but how I did it. The timing, the hesitation, even things I'd already forgotten. I flipped back to the start of the notebook. It was dated 6 months ago. The entries continued daily, rarely missing a beat. They tracked everything, from the groceries I brought in, to the songs I hummed while brushing my teeth. I picked a third notebook at random, one closer to the back of the shelf. 11:22 p.m. He stared at the ceiling for over an hour. He's not sleeping well again. The penmanship never changed. The tone was always distant, factual, like a scientist observing a lab rat. I looked at the shelf. There had to be over 40 notebooks. Maybe more. Each one probably covering weeks, maybe months of observation. And it was all about me. I glanced toward the window. It was tightly sealed, the curtain drawn and pinned. He couldn't have seen through that. Not from his apartment. Not unless he was inside mine. That evening, I brought one of the notebooks home. I told myself it was just to understand, to make sure I wasn't overreacting. But as I flipped through the pages in my kitchen, the truth settled deeper into my gut. He'd been watching me for months. One entry described the way I scratched my neck while reading. Another noted how long I stirred my coffee on Saturday mornings. There were mentions of arguments I'd had on the phone, things I barely remembered myself. He even knew when I left dishes in the sink overnight. Some entries included things I couldn't explain. 10:33 p.m. He opened the bottom drawer, stared at the folded photo for 18 seconds, then shut it. That drawer hadn't been opened in years. And that photo, it wasn't something I ever looked at. I had forgotten it was even there. How did he know? I began searching the apartment, closets, behind the vents, light fixtures. I didn't know what I was looking for, cameras, holes, wires. But I found nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that every object in my apartment had been witnessed. The thought of someone entering my space without permission made my skin crawl. I changed the locks. I installed a camera near the door. I taped threads over the window seals. Every drawer now had a paper sliver taped in the edge, the kind that would fall if moved. I went back to reading. 11:48 p.m. He's restless tonight. Pacing. Seems to be searching for something. That was from 2 nights ago. He had written it before I found the notebooks, which meant he'd still been watching. Even as I began to read about him, even as I started to understand, I checked the last page of the notebook. It ended with one line: he's starting to suspect. I took time off work. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every creak in the walls, every soft hum from the pipes sounded like footsteps or whispering voices. I checked the locks again, all intact. The camera I'd installed never showed anything suspicious. But still, I knew someone had been inside. The notebooks weren't guesses. They weren't assumptions. One of them had an entry that detailed what I murmured to myself during a nightmare. 2:41 a.m., he said, "Don't let it in," while asleep. How could he have known that, unless he had been in the same room? I reviewed my own security footage, sensed every log. There were small skips in the recordings, seconds missing here and there. Enough to make me wonder if someone had tampered with it. I went to the building manager again. Asked her if Mr. Delaney ever had a spare key. She hesitated. He was here before we upgraded the system. He might have. Had an old master. But he was harmless, sweet even, just lonely. That word stuck with me. Lonely. I opened a new notebook from the stack I'd kept hidden in my apartment. This one had a different feel. Near the middle, he had written, "I don't think he realizes how much he needs to be seen. He only exists when I'm watching. He becomes clearer the more I notice. Without me, he drifts." It didn't sound like observation anymore. It sounded like belief, obsession. I flipped to the final page. There, in Mr. Delaney's precise handwriting, he doesn't understand yet. But he will. Below that, taped carefully, was a photo. It had been taken from inside my apartment. The angle showed my bedroom. Curtains open, me asleep. The timestamp was from a week ago, long after Delaney had supposedly died. And suddenly I realized not all the notebooks were his. I gathered all the notebooks and locked them in a storage trunk. I shoved it into the back of my closet and taped the door shut. I didn't want to see them again. I told myself I was done, that knowing was worse than not knowing. But the fear didn't go away. If anything, it sharpened. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of something falling. A soft thud. I ran to the living room. One of the notebooks was lying on the floor. I hadn't opened the trunk, hadn't touched the closet, and yet, it was there. On the carpet, open. I stepped closer. The entry was new. He's awake now. He knows this part of the story. He's wondering what he'll do next. He's thinking about the hallway. I backed away, heart pounding. I opened the closet. The trunk was sealed, still locked. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, waiting. At 3:12 a.m., I heard footsteps just outside my door, slow, unhurried. Then the distinct click of my mailbox slot opening, then closing. I waited until sunrise to check it. Inside was a small envelope, no stamp, no name. Inside was a single photo. Me, sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, eyes wide, staring toward the door. It had been taken hours earlier, from outside the window, but my apartment is on the 4th floor. That afternoon, I checked the last notebook one more time. I hadn't seen the back cover before. It looked like leather. I peeled it open. There was something stitched inside, a folded page. One sentence, now he will write the rest. This morning, I found a new notebook on my desk. Same black cover, same paper. Only one entry written. He thinks he's alone now. I didn't write that. But when I looked around, everything in the apartment was exactly where it should be, except the pen. It was warm. If you've ever gone through something similar, or know someone who has, leave a comment below. Sometimes, just telling it is already a way to protect yourself. And if this video made you think twice before letting your guard down, then it was already worth it. And if you want to keep hearing stories that might help keep you alive, subscribe. The next story could be yours.